Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're going to continue once again with our faction focus stuff. I figured since we're going to be talking about Bretonnia in a video that should already be out now, we might already go into that of the Tomb Kings and get the two launch factions out of the way before we can start looking towards, well, pretty much everything else. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go over the special rules, anything that is new, anything, noteworthy, the usual stuff that we've been doing, and obviously because, and out of respect to Games Workshop, I won't be going over every single point cost because, well, that would basically guarantee people to replicate the books. But the release is almost here, so it's only a matter of time until you can start writing up your army lists and so on. So yeah, let's talk about the Tomb Kings, a faction which had a really cool overhaul for 8th edition in terms of aesthetic and so on. But, yeah, there were a lot of problems with, well, a lot of the faction issues, so let's go check everything out. So this is the roster for the Tomb Kings. For character options, we have 50%, and that would be the Tomb King, the Tomb Prince, the High Priest, the Mortuary Priest, and finally we've got the characters of Royal Heralds and Necrotech. So you've got a few options there to have a little fun with, and when we go to the core, again, 25%, this is going to be the common thing. You need to have 25% core, so Skeletal Warriors, Skeletal Archers, Skeletal Skirmishers, Tomb Swarms, Skeletal Horsemen, Skeletal Horsemen Archers, Skeletal Chariots. Now this is where one interesting thing comes in. A unit of Tomb Guard and a unit of Sepulchre Stalkers may be taken as a core choice when playing as a vanilla Tomb King army, which is pretty good. That means you can already start fleshing out your core with some more powerful units if you so wish. Keep in mind that for this video, once again, I'll be talking about the vanilla rules, not the arcane journals. You have those already in a different video that released about 2 days ago. For special, we have the Tomb Guard, Yub Shakti, Sepulchre Stalkers once again, Carrion, and Necropolis Knights, which is pretty good. Then you've got a limit of 0 to 3 Tomb Scorpions per 1,000 points, and 0 to 2 Khemrian War Sphinxes, not counting the character mounts by the way, per 1,000 points. Then when we go to rare, we've got the Necrolith Colossus, a bone giant, the Necro Sphinx, 0 to 2 Screaming Catapults per 1,000 points, and 0 to 1 Casket of Souls per 1,000 points. There's not a lot of new baseline vanilla stuff. The roster pretty much remains the same as it was in 8th edition, barring skirmishers being a new thing, but there's a good reason, to be honest. They are a pretty good roster overall. It's the same thing with a lot of these races. There's not a lot of new stuff being added in, barring again, I guess, from the arcane journals when each of the races get theirs, but overall, I mean, it's pretty damn good. There's nothing really to complain about. Tomb Kings, again, had a really pretty roster, and it was really fleshed out. It was just rules that were the problem. Okay, we need to talk about the Hierophant rule, because that is back, and obviously it's a big thing that people need to know about it. So your army must include one Lich Priest to be its Hierophant. If you have multiple, it's fine. The thing is that you need to go with the highest wizard level, so that would be, your level 4 or your level 3, those are the ones that you're going to be bringing the most, but it has to be the highest level. In games, you also need to tell your opponent who is your Hierophant. Now, the big thing to know about this is that if your Hierophant dies, all your units with Nehekar and Undead, which is a large majority of your roster, I think actually all of it, they lose regeneration saves, which is not great. And then pretty much every start of turn sub-phase for the remainder of the game, then you need to do a leadership test. If the test is failed, you start taking damage. So it's very much like in Total War, if you're not a person who's played tabletop before, when your character dies, generally your units start to crumble, right? Well, depending on the difficulty and so on, but you know what I mean. So what this means is that you need to guard this character with your life. The great thing is you can actually protect them very well. There are some new systems in play for Warhammer the Old World, which is really good for keeping characters safe, even if they're not attached to a certain unit. You do have some stuff involved which will allow you to regenerate wounds, regeneration's a big thing, which is a 5+ naturally for you, which is pretty good, and some other items. I wouldn't be too worried. I know some people were a bit apprehensive at the beginning, but I've not seen too much of an issue. Well, everything like 8th edition, where it was very easy to snipe out characters, maybe, but I've not really been seeing too much sniping, in all honesty. Okay, we're going to start talking about special rules, because there is a fair amount. The first one is Arrows of Asp, and this means no modifiers when shooting. So this means no modifiers for better shooting or for worse shooting. You're always hitting at the same value that your basic archer or any other ranged unit would use. Ultimately, this is very good because if you're at a far distance, yeah, you're still shooting at the same. If you're shooting through cover, same. This is something that was there in 8th edition, and it is quite good because if you want to do full shooty armies, kind of reliving Khalida without unfortunately having Khalida, I hope that we do see her in the future as a campaign pack though, because, I mean, it's Khalida. Yeah, pretty good. The next is Cleaving Blow, which means that if a model has this rule and you roll a natural 6, you automatically do the wound, no armor save or regeneration save allowed, but if they do have a ward, they can actually take this. And this can be done to regular infantry, heavy infantry, light infantry, heavy cavalry, or war beasts. So nothing like big monsters and stuff, but I mean, yeah, you'll be doing a lot of damage here. The next is Curse of the Necropolis. If a model with this special rule loses its last wound to an enemy attack, the unit that made this attack must immediately make a leadership test. If this test is failed, the enemy unit suffers D3 strength 2 hits with an AP of minus. It just says minus here. Okay, I've just checked the physical book and it just says minus, and that's it. So I'll reach out to GW, and if I get a response, I'll update the pinned comment for this video, because that just threw me off. The next one is Dry as Dust. Each time this model suffers an unsaved wound from a flaming attack, your opponent may roll on a d6. On a 1 to 3, the flaming attacks quickly die down and the model escapes further harm. On a roll of a 4+, the flames take hold and you lose an additional wound. So this will be anything that has the Dry as Dust rule. It does say here though that note that excess wounds caused to a model will have no additional effect in the case of a character that is part of a challenge. In which case, this special rule counts for overkill. Excess wounds do not spill over into other models in the unit. Yeah, I mean, you're going to be taking a lot of damage there. They can take the risk. Well, it's not really even a risk, right? It's just trying to get an extra wound in. A few models have this, not all of them. You're going to be taking damage, but I wouldn't say that you're going to be taking a lot of damage if you know what you're doing. Plus, regeneration works really well. I mean, you can even bring back chariots, which is great, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. The last one is Indomitable, and this has got a value of X. A unit with this special rule reduces the number of wounds suffered due to unstable special rule by the number shown in the brackets, right? So if there's a character with Indomitable 2, they don't take those 2 wounds. And it says here that you can have units together with different values, in which case you use the highest value to kind of help you out a little bit more. We're still on the special rules, by the way. I had to make a second slide because there's just so many. The next one is Khopesh. So essentially anything that has Khopesh has an armor-piercing characteristic of -1. Super cool, right? Nehekaran Phalanx. So as long as you have your unit in close order and the units themselves have shields, you may choose not to give ground and you just stay there if you lose around the combat. However, if the enemy unit has double your unit strength, and we'll talk about unit strength in another video, yeah, you have to give ground, right? Which kind of makes sense. I'm perfectly fine with that. Then we have Nehekaran Undead. This is the thing that you need to really keep an eye on. So you cannot march, right? Unless you have flying, right? Because obviously flying is its own thing. But standard troops cannot march. Don't worry, there's a lot of ways to actually make your troops move forward. There's special rules with your princes and your kings and so on. But you also gain the following universal special rules: Fear, Unbreakable, Immune to Psychology, and Unstable. So generally, you've got a lot coming for you. There were a lot of negatives before. However, you've got an army basically that just all causes fear, unless it's an even bigger monster, which then causes terror. Unbreakable, very, very useful. I'm telling you, this is really, really good in terms of just everything. There's negatives to outweigh the positives, and there's positives to outweigh the negatives. I do think that the Tomb Kings are fine. And then lastly, there's Resurrecting the Fallen, which is something that you're going to be seeing a lot with the Tomb Kings, especially pretty much, Tomb Guard, chariots, and stuff like that. It is important to note that it works like this. When you're doing heals, there's a few ways to doing heals, which is why I'm not going into everything. First, you have to heal your characters. This is mixed units, by the way. Second, it's stuff with more than 1 wound. Next, it's the champion. Then the standard bearer musician if you're going for infantry stuff, and then finally the rank and file units, right? Overall, there's a lot of ways to heal up, so you're pretty much not going to have to worry about the negative special rules. You've got a lot, man. It's 2 pages. I wouldn't complain. I think that the Nehekarans get a lot more special rules than other factions, to be honest. Tomb Kings I've been actually writing with the Arcane Journals because I really want to try out a Nehekaran Royal Host. It just seems really interesting for me for a possible future battle rep. But vanilla-wise, they seem pretty good too. I mean, this is all vanilla rules, you know? Alright, now we're going to talk about magic. So the Lich Priest can take the following core laws. This is the law of elementalism, illusion, or necromancy. So you've got some pretty good ones. I actually think they're fairly decent. From a lore perspective, it does kind of strike me odd that they're going to be using necromancy, however, but I can overlook that. It's just a bit weird because the Mortuary Cult was more about eternal life, not twisting it in a sense. But, you know, some concessions have to be made, especially since we don't have full laws anymore. Speaking of which, again, we have 3 spells that we can play around with. And, yeah, if you've got one of the core laws and you like these spells more, you just switch out the ones that you've naturally rolled for and pick the ones that you want. So that actually works well. Again, I do wish, and I've said this in every video, I do wish that we had full complete laws, but you never know for the future. The first spell is Jav's Incantation of Cursed Blades, which is an enchantment spell with a value of 7+, range on self, which is until the next turn sub-phase. Every unit in the command range of the caster may re-roll natural 2 hits of 1, which is not too bad. Then we've got Kassar's Incantation of the Desert Winds. This is another enchantment with a value of 6+ or 10+. The range is on self. And what this rule does is it makes you do a reserve move. So on a 6+, a single unit within your caster's range may then make a reserve move, which means that they get to move again, effectively giving you a march. On a 10+, every unit in the command range of the caster can then make a reserve move. Again, pretty much allowing a fair chunk of your army to march if you know how to deploy quite tightly, but not tightly enough that you're going to be suffering from trebuchet damage and stuff like that. And lastly, we have Yusek's Incantation of Desiccation. So this is a hex with a casting value of 10+, range of 15 inches, and until the end of this turn, the enemy unit suffers -1 to strength and toughness. It's also important to note that if you cast this hex on an enemy that already has a hex, the other hex immediately expires. Which, yeah, I mean, makes sense. Overall, yeah, pretty good spells. The movement one is probably the best one, to be honest, because being able to just make a reserve move gets you closer to your enemy quicker. I mean, that's not too bad. Alright, so now we have to talk about what's new. So, you've got Skeletal Skirmishers, which might not seem like the most interesting thing, because it is still from the same kit that you already have, but I would say it actually kind of works. So essentially what they will have is the same point values as the standard Skeletal Warriors or Skeletal Archers, because you can have these as skirmishers with hand, weapon, and shield, or you can have them with bows. You can't have them with full command, by the way, which is actually quite curious, but you can give them ambush. They already come with Chariot Runners, which is pretty cool for a foot unit, and they come with Vanguard and Skirmishers. So these guys will be upfront and personal. I kind of like the idea. You can have a small unit, which is essentially just going to slow enemy charges down a little bit. You can have them harass a little bit too. I'm kind of upfront and personal with my legions, but I might try to see what I can do with this. I've spoken to a few other content creators and they've definitely found some fun stuff, so I'm looking forward to this. The Tomb Kings have been an army that I've been looking forward to for quite a bit. I've got the models, I've had the models for a while, and it's just been like, I really want new rules for them, and I really want something to give me a reason to. One of the things I really want to get myself is Upshati, but I think they're all sold out within 5 minutes. Always fun, right? Now, the only other new thing is the Necrolith Bone Dragon, and this isn't a unit, it's a mount option, 195 points. But what makes it so good is because of the new mount system. It adds +1 toughness to your character and +5 extra wounds. So yeah, your character with 3 wounds is going to have 8. It can fly for 9, it's got 5 attacks naturally itself with a weapon skill 4. I mean, it's not great, but it's still something, right? It's got a special rule known as Cloud of Dust, which means that shooting attacks take a -1 modifier to actually hit the damn thing. Again, super cool. Stomp attacks as natural. Its own natural melee attack is at a -2 of AP with a strength of 6, so that's pretty damn good overall. And it's got a breath attack too, which is strength 3. You need to use a breath template there with -2 AP, magical attacks, and multiple wounds too. So if you're doing this on big hordes of big monsters, yeah, you're going to be able to do quite a decent amount of damage, even with a low amount of strength. I just want to say that I'm really keen on this new mount system. No more having to see what you're hitting, random stuff, and so on. This is a good system, and I think it's going to work very well. If you're worried about the Tomb Kings because of the whole hero font thing, yeah, you just get this on this dude, and you are good to go. Also, keep in mind that you've also got Indomitable too. All the other bonuses like stuff like Swift Stride and Terror on this is great. Super happy with this. It's a stunning piece too. I know some people were expecting more of a crocodile, and in truth, I kind of was too, but a little bit of a throwback to Warmaster isn't a bad thing. Alright, we're going to jump into the pros and cons now, and there's quite a few. The first thing, which might not be the biggest thing for people, but yeah, awesome minis. While the skeletons themselves have not really aged too well, you've got one of the best looking roster in terms of monsters. The Necrosphinx, for example, even the Upshati, which is fairly old. The visual aesthetic is incredibly pleasing, and it's why I have so many Tomb Kings myself. It's just they look super cool, and yeah, I want to field an army of cool looking beasts and monsters and so on. Another pro is that fear and terror are going to be a big thing in your army, because even your base troops have fear, so it's a pretty good situation there. Obviously, it won't affect all your enemies, but you're going to be making them roll fear rolls and so on quite often, so you definitely have a one-up advantage there towards your enemy. Another thing is that you've got a lot of regen saves, pretty much your whole army, I believe. So yeah, you're going to have a natural ward there unless there are ways to get rid of it, but yeah. I mean, you're going to be able to even resurrect a lot of your army, even stuff like chariots, which is really, really fun. We've already been seeing that. The Games Workshop team posted a battle report with the chariots coming back. If you get lucky with regeneration, if you get lucky with your various heals, you'll be able to get a lot of your forces up and running. I'm a big fan of this. The special rules are also quite good. The whole thing with phalanx and so on, really, really cool. There are a few negatives there, which I wouldn't say are going to be damning for your army. I would say that this is a faction that is going to take a while to get used to, because there are so many rules though, so I'm going to put that down in the middle as a kind of neutral thing, because ultimately it's good to have a lot of special rules, but it's also can get a little complicated for newer players. Which is why I was like, well, this is a bit weird that this is going to be the launch faction, considering that Tomb Kings historically have had a lot of rules. A bit of a con is the hero font special rule. And the only reason why I say this is because they suffered through that in 8th edition, and well, earlier editions too. The vampire counts in Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition had that fixed, where another person with a lore of vampires could kind of take over as the army general. Well, not really the general, but you know, the one keeping everyone up and animated. And that seems to have been gone here. I do wonder if the vampires in Warhammer the Old World, even as a legacy list, have the fix, or if they're going back to the 6th edition styling. I mean, it's not a bad thing. Keep in mind that it is easier to keep your characters safe here, but it's still one of these things that you have to remember, and it's not so much for a problem for long-standing players like myself and like yourself if you're one of the older guard, but a newer player might have a little bit of trouble kind of getting used to that, right? The roster is well-rounded. Yeah, I know I've got a cool roster there, but that's more static. In terms of like functionality, you've got a little bit of everything. You've got artillery, you've got spellcasting, you've got big monsters, you've got proper foot troops, you've got cavalry, you've got chariots, everything. Sure, you don't have like the amazing cavalry of Bretonnia or the range capabilities of the Empire, but obviously these factions have to be split up a little bit in terms of playstyles and so on, so everyone is a little bit different. But I would say that if you're looking for a cavalry-based list, you are more than able to do one here, especially with the chariots and so on. If you're looking for a monster-heavy list and you don't want to play beastmen, for example, you've got the Tomb Kings too. If you want to go with a proper legion, that's what I'm theming. If you've seen my post on my army on Twitter, I got a pretty nice list theming of just a legion of troops and monsters flanking it. I'm not big on chariots myself, but that's just more like aesthetic and just theming, right? When I go on to like more competitive lists, yes, I'll bring a few chariots. Really, a little bit of a con, and I wouldn't say it's a big con, is that a lot of the miniatures are quite old. This is more so the skeletons than anything else, which we talked about in the pro section with the cool roster. It can kind of be a bit put off for new players to jump in and see skeletons that are pretty much as old, if not older than they are. I will say, though, I don't mind personally. So I would personally put it on neutral, but I know a lot of players have been turned off. Even returning players were expecting the skeletons to kind of get a little bit of a redo. Their arms, for some reason, their hands are bigger than a lot of like real life skeletons, right? Like they just have massive hands for some reason. So I'm actually going to put that in neutral instead. Because, like, we've seen a slow update to stuff. The swarms have been updated, and they look absolutely amazing. So I honestly believe that eventually, with time, we'll actually start to see more updates for stuff. It's just all a matter of if this does well. And considering that a lot of stuff started selling so insanely fast, it's probably going to be selling well. From my own point of view, I'm liking how the Tomb Kings are looking. I don't know if they're going to be like my core army. Naturally, on this channel, when you see battle reports, you're going to see every single faction, every single race, and so on. But it's one of these things where I'm leaning towards the Tomb Kings, but I'm also leaning towards a few others. We'll have a discussion about that as time progresses, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's have a bit of a discussion. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to come. We've got all these core factions to go. I think there's going to be another one today. This video, as you could have told by the intro, was supposed to come yesterday, but unfortunately, with the Araby release, I had to push that back because I was embargoed with the modders for Total War Warhammer, so that became a little bit of a thing. But let me know what you guys think again, and I'll see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.